Nostalgic memory is one of the most powerful and comforting abilities our brains provide. A figurative time machine in your mind that takes you back to moments you knew joy, warmth, and comfort, reminding you where you came from and how you got to where you are today. So many of these memories for me are linked back to my childhood and involve the wonderfully loving and endlessly fun, expansive family that I was lucky enough to be adopted into. A great many of the most powerful ones are tied to an incredibly strong and influential woman in my life, my Grandma Elsie. There's a reason there are songs and stories about kids being ridiculously excited to go see their grandparents. My family's version of going over the river and through the woods was a drive through southern Oregon to reach the small town of Lakeview. To a 6-year-old, this felt like an endless journey until I was introduced to the fast button. That allowed us to get there pretty quick. I think it took another 4 years or so before I realized the fast button was just cruise control pushed rather dramatically before I fell asleep. Up until that point, I was perfectly fine with believing cars had just kind of developed hyperspeed technology and that with the fast button locked and loaded, we would arrive at my grandparents' house in no time. I would always wake up to a "we're here" announcement as we pulled onto my grandparents' street and parked in front of their home. It didn't matter what time of the day we arrived, early morning, late at night, we'd be greeted with arms wide by two amazing grinning grandparents. Inside was the delicious aroma of cookies and mouth-watering food, and the novelty of cable television. I believe my grandma actually owned a cookie jar, but I don't think it was physically possible for cookies to reach it before they were snatched off of the counter and devoured. My brother and I would sit at the table, legs swinging under us on the large and solid wooden chairs, as we studiously applied crayon to paper in an effort to show our appreciation for the harvest of sugary goodness laid before us. A drawing of an architecturally dubious building, a military tank, 3 birds, the sun, and multicolored flowers would be presented to my grandmother, who would accept it the same way an art connoisseur would accept a Monet. Eyes wide, mouth agape, struggling to find the words to adequately express the emotions that this masterpiece imparted before gushing over it until you were on your tiptoes grinning wide enough to crack your head in half. Then the egg timer would make a ding, and suddenly there were cinnamon rolls. This would be laid in front of you with a coffee cup of milk to go with it. A bite here, a sip there, sitting, grinning at my brothers, our mouths stretched to capacity to cram as much doughy goodness as possible. Another sip of milk until your eyes went wide as from about 4 inches away a giant cockroach stared at you from the bottom of the coffee cup. A suspicious squint and exploratory finger would quickly confirm it to be a ceramic joke grafted onto the bottom of the cup, and Grandma's quiet shoulder-shaking laugh, eyes crinkling with a warm smile, would begin as you started laughing and pointing at it. I grew up in a small town called Sherwood. We had a house out in the countryside at the end of a winding half-mile gravel road that my brother and I would slowly amble along to get to and from the bus every day, splashing in mud puddles, throwing rocks, stuffing bad report cards in the old stone fence on the side of the road. There were only a handful of neighbors sprinkled along the way, and not really any other kids aside from my brother. We ran around in the woods and entertained ourselves, at least until Pete got some dirt on him and he would run inside like he was desperate to make it into a quarantine clean room to decontaminate. It was a fun and adventurous childhood, and it kicked up a couple of notches when my grandparents built a house just up the hill from us. Our walks home suddenly took much, much longer as we stopped by their house to grab a stick or 10 of licorice from the tub in the laundry room, plopping down to play some Nintendo and watch Little Rascals VHS tapes before we kind of remembered we were supposed to be down the hill doing our homework. A quick hug and an "I love you," and off we would dash. Weekend sleepovers on the floor of their living room were common, watching Blazers games and classic westerns with Grandpa, crafts and cooking with Grandma. Their home was a nexus for visits and pop-ins from all the aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends. The holidays were synonymous with Grandma and Grandpa's house. Coffee cake, turkey, lasagna, hollandaise sauce, jellos, cakes, pies, and cookies on top of some cookies, followed by more cookies. We'd crawl around under the table and run up and down the halls. We'd play soccer out on the expansive lawn and have huge battles with water balloons, super soakers, and bits of tied-off surgical tubing that created water laser beams when released. There were VHS copies of every Disney movie ever created, and then some. I think I watched Angels in the Outfield and Cool Runnings enough to be considered an honorary executive producer at this point. Hours curled up under what we called the fuzzy blanket, which was a smooth material that in no way was fuzzy at all, but nobody ever even considered questioning it. The walls of their home were covered in evidence of their love. Carvings created by my grandma's father, ancient arrowheads found and collected on adventures with their friends, pictures of their children and grandchildren, artwork from their talented kids in frames on the walls, and artwork from their loving grandchildren covering every square centimeter of their fridge. 3 hops up the steps of their porch and a screen door thrown wide, and the smell of baking and familiarity hit you as you threw off your shoes, hugged a pair of grandparents that were genuinely happy to see you every single time. See, my grandma has a superpower. It's not one that led her to a lifetime of fighting crime. She wasn't pulling on a cape and tights and zipping around to punch villains with enormous hairstyling expenses. Grandma Elsie's superpower is that no matter who she is talking to, she can make them feel like they are her absolute favorite person in the world. It's an incredible level of affection and genuine compassion I've never seen equaled by anyone else so consistently, and she does it effortlessly. She's worn many hats over the years: daughter, sister, wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, matriarch, head chef, counselor, advisor, biased art critic, cheerleader, teacher, student, judge, jury, friend, waitress, event coordinator, licorice dealer. She's held many names as well. To her wonderful husband, Oki, she's often Else, Darlin, Doll. To her sons and daughters, she's always Mom. She's Aunt Elsie with all of her nieces and nephews from her large family. To her grandkids, she actually collected a wide array of monikers. She's always been Grandma to me, but my younger cousins started to call her Meemaw, and it stuck like glue for an entire other generation. For my own collection of children I have with Jenna, they decided Elsie the Great sounded better than Great-Grandma Elsie. On top of that, I'm sure there are many nicknames and pseudonyms built up over a lifetime I will never even know the half of. She has touched so many lives in an absolute infinity of different yet unquestionably positive ways. She's selflessly provided anything, she has been everything, and she loves everyone. I don't think any combination of character traits has ever provided a more perfect example of what grandma could possibly mean to any child going back the full length of time. I feel the good people over at Merriam-Webster could save a whole lot of time in print if they simply updated their dictionary to read Grandma, noun, definition, Elsie Grossarth. Life can be hard sometimes. It can swirl you around, blocks out the sun, drops you in the middle of an ocean of despair and uncertainty that can leave you feeling afraid and alone. When that happens, it's nice to know that for the rest of my life, I can fire up that time machine and be right back there in that kitchen, sharing some quiet time with my grandma, eating a cinnamon roll, and waiting for that cockroach to make his appearance. I love you, Grandma.